Fox News alert, the push to get Obamacare's replacement across the finish line. Right now, President Trump meeting with key GOP House leaders at the White House as he continues his push to sell the party's health care reform plan. This is Outnumbered. I'm Meghan McCain. Here today, Harris Faulkner, Sandra Smith, Fox and Friends weekend co-host Abby Huntsman, and today's #OneLuckyGuy, veteran newsman and Fox News correspondent at large. You know him, we all know him, Geraldo Rivera.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming back on.
When they say veterans, that mean old?
No, that doesn't, but we are going to get to some fresh breaking news, and I'm glad you're here because you're going to help us take this all apart, this conversation, and break it down. So here's what we are watching. We're waiting for the president's tape play out because we were able to get some video of something that just happened. He's had a discussion with each House committee chairperson of all of the exact committees that have jurisdiction over repealing and replacing Obamacare and that plan that is in the works. We know that the vice president is in the room. This is in the Roosevelt room on the list. Congresswoman Diane Black of Tennessee, chairperson of the House Budget Committee. Representative Kevin Brady of Texas, chairperson of the House Ways and Means Committee. So this is a key meeting and discussion that the president is having. And you know the back and forth and the hours and hours and the rewrites and where we are right now in this journey, and he's trying to pull it together. The plan would be to have something on his desk potentially by Easter. Let's watch together.
Hello, everybody. Mr. Vice President. Mr. President. Thank you. I want to thank each of the House committee leaders for being with us today. Your devotion and leadership has been amazing. I want to just applaud you and the diligent work of your committees to advance the Obamacare repeal and replacement legislation that we've been talking about for a long time and that we've been running with, and I ran with it, I can tell you. And that's what people want. They want repeal and replace. The bill passed just now through Ways and Means, and it will I think the committee just voted recently, right? Yep. Your other committee, Energy and Commerce. And it was a very good vote. And congratulations, that was a good job. Amazing. We must act now to save Americans from the imploding Obamacare disaster. Premiums have skyrocketed by double digits and triple digits in some cases. As an example, Arizona, which I talk about all the time, 116% increase, and it's going up a lot higher. 17 would be a disaster for Obamacare. That's the year it was meant to explode because Obama won't be here. That was when it was supposed to be. It'll get even worse. As bad as it is now, it'll get even worse. Choices are disappearing as one insurer drops out after another. Today, 1/3 of all counties now have only one insurer on the Obamacare exchanges, and the exchanges themselves are a disaster. The House Repeal and Replace plan ends the Obamacare tax hikes, cutting taxes by hundreds of billions of dollars. It eliminates the Obamacare mandate that forces Americans to buy government-approved plans. We all know that one. It provides states with flexibility over how Medicaid dollars are spent, giving power from Washington and back to local government, which we all want to see. They're going to do a much better job. And the plan empowers individual Americans to buy the health insurance that is right for them, not the plan forced on them by government. You all remember you can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan. I know, Greg, you've never heard that, right? But it was said many, many times, and it turned out to be not true. This is the time we're going to get it done. We're working together. We have some great results. We have tremendous spirit. And I think it's something that's just going to happen very shortly. So thank you all very much, and we're going to get to work. Thank you.
So we were watching prepared remarks there from President Trump and also some ad-libbing just at the top, because he said he wanted to recognize that just passed now in the Committee of Ways and Means is the bill that they put forth, and then also has passed the Energy and Commerce. That's, of course, all in the House. After his prepared remarks, and among them, I should say, he said at one point that Obamacare was meant to explode because President Obama would not be here, and that solicited some comments from the couch. So let's come out and see what people were thinking and saying. Megan?
You know, this is going to be a tough battle for him right now. We've been talking at length this week about how there's this ideological split within the Republican Party. Freedom Caucus people taking it to the mattresses, saying if we don't get the kind of bill that we promised the American public and ran on, then this basically is just the second version of Obamacare. And we have President Trump here saying this is going to be a great bill. We're going to get it through. There's basically no problems. We were laughing because I was laughing because he said that Obamacare was meant to explode, which was obviously an interesting comment and commentary on the idea that it was meant to fail.
Geraldo?
I also seized on what Megan said to suggest that President Obama premeditated the failure of Obamacare because he was going to be out of office, I think is kind of comical. And I don't believe the president meant it literally. Abby and I joke, you know, maybe he doesn't mean half of what he says. He certainly didn't mean...
How many times are people saying he didn't mean it literally?
Yeah, he didn't mean it.
He's got a healthy sense of humor.
Well, that, of course, comes up a lot with some of the tweets that he puts out. But some of his exact words that just came out of that moment that he shared with us was, we must act now to save Americans from the imploding Obamacare disaster. That must act now is something that even his Republican colleagues...
But then you see people like Tom Cotton coming out so vociferously saying, we have to get this right. We can't do this right now. I agree with him. I don't understand exactly what the rush is, because if we screw this up and if this ends up being a failure, as I have been saying all week, the political expense that will happen in the midterm elections for Republicans will be absolutely cataclysmic.
Yeah, I think part of it, though, and Abby, I'm curious to get your thought on this, because I know you've covered some of the town halls. You've been out there among these voters who were promised one thing and they are looking forward to it. But the other issue is that they have paid already some of the, you know, they've enrolled, they've paid some of the fees if they didn't want to enroll. This thing is really kind of already moving, and they don't want to keep it moving for another year.
And now we have discussion about possibly using the nuclear option. Congressman Dave Bratt wants Senate Republicans to use this so-called nuclear option to overcome Democratic opposition, which would require a majority rather than 60 votes. He tells Fox News, quote, "We're doing this to save President Trump. Everyone says, why don't you just go along with the thing? We just need some action over in the Senate. They are hiding under their desks. They are not full of action over there." Megan?
Abby, I want to come back to Abby because I wanted to give her a chance.
No, I mean, I can speak to both of those. I mean, health care is not only probably the most complicated thing we're going to deal with going forward, but it's also the most personal to the American people. And I've seen that going around this country, talking to voters. It's heartbreaking to hear their stories. But as you said, Harris, a lot of them are already in the thick of Obamacare, which is why it makes it so complicated. The quote that you just mentioned, Sandra, I think is all the more reminder of how we should do things differently this time than President Obama did 8 years ago, because that was passed through, really shoved down people's throats through straight partisan lines. If we want to get this right, as Megan was saying, you've got to have bipartisan support for this. So I think it's more important for Republicans to take their time to get everyone on board before shoving it down anyone's throat, because we've seen that is not ultimately what is best for the American people, and we've got to get this thing right.
I think there's zero chance of bipartisan cooperation.
Really?
And I respectfully disagree. I think that Paul Ryan is exactly right. This is the best chance they have. If they don't get this passed, and this is a modest proposal compared to what Senator Cotton and these other guys, they just want everybody to fend for themselves, essentially, except for old-timers and really poor people when it comes to medical care. I think that this is a reasonable compromise. I don't like it. I want socialized medicine. I want Medicare for everybody. But if the Republicans don't get anything done, I think that this bill makes some sense. It does give some, some consideration to the poor. It does give some consideration to the chronically ill, to those with pre-existing conditions and so forth. I think that if they don't do this, they aren't going to do anything.
So what's the alternative,
And it will preoccupy everybody. How many times did we vote to repeal and replace Obamacare? The
well, it's that
30 times, 25 times. It's just going to go on, and that's all we'll talk about.
Behind trying to get it done. But, you know, McClatchy Newspapers was reporting today, Megan, that, and I mentioned it just briefly, that the goal would be to get this through the House and Senate and get something on the president's desk by April. April's the middle of, or rather by Easter. That's April 16th. That's relatively quickly.
Listen, everything is political, as we all know at this point, and I think people in the Freedom Caucus like Rand Paul, people like Justin Amash, these are purists, purist conservatives, especially when it comes to fiscal issues, in the most intense sense I could possibly convey to you. So part of this is just a fight of political ideology, that they don't want Medicaid expansion, that they ran in a certain way and have made promises to their constituents. And if they come back to Arkansas, like Tom Cotton is, and says, I voted for Obamacare Light, but I ran on repealing and completely replacing, there's political prices to pay.
Part of it goes back to what you have been talking about so much, Megan, is the messaging that has been coming out of this White House. And as Sean Spicer said, his words, that the president is in sell mode. Part of the problem is they're not selling what they have.
Not selling it. A lot of people don't even understand what our health care. I cannot tell you how many people that I talk to, they're like, I have no idea what our health care system is right now. My sister, Harris, we've talked about this. She's got type 1 diabetes. She calls me in tears all the time because insulin prices have just gone through the roof. But she said, now the plan that I'm on that's more affordable, she said, I have to change the doctor. I love him. I love my diabetic doctor. I have to change it to actually afford the insurance I'm on. And she's lucky because she can pay for her insurance. But she goes, I'm realizing what every other American is going through, and it's complicated, and it's really hurtful, and it's emotional, and it's painful.
So what's interesting, and we heard Speaker of the House Paul Ryan talk about this in terms of like the EpiPen and costs coming, down, and affordability. Diabetes affects, and as you look into the future, so many people in this country that the pharmaceutical companies have really got a hold. So you've got to try to break that. You saw that Congressman Lewis was willing to cross last week, reportedly cross political lines, to talk now that they've got a deal on the table. I don't know, Geraldo. Can we be more optimistic and say that they can get something done with both parties?
Getting the drug companies to lower the cost of drugs and selling insurance across state lines, as I understand it, are not in the bill proposed by Ryan and associates in the House. I think those are the kinds of things everybody can relate to. But I'm telling you, come the midterm elections 2018, you're going to go to districts, not the Freedom Caucus, because they're Freedom Caucus guys because they're in safe districts. In people in the swing districts, in those purple districts, they're going to have people like your sister standing up there and saying, I lost my my EpiPen, or my diabetes medication, or I lost this, or my Aunt Tilly died because there was no care for her. And you're going to see a sea change politically. They're better. The Ryan plan is a reasonable compromise. If they don't stick to that, then better off letting it go. Let Obamacare ride. Let it go broke if it's going to go broke.
We're going to see if our president is quite the deal maker he has always claimed to be, though, in the next few weeks. All right, at least 6 states are now on board trying to block key elements of President Trump's new travel ban executive order. Whether this narrower version can withstand all the legal challenges. Plus, the Justice Department will reportedly dispatch 50 judges across the country to deal with a massive backlog of immigration cases as DHS announces a big drop in illegal border crossings. Whether President Trump is doing a good job when it comes to illegal immigration.
A showdown over President Trump's new travel ban, temporarily blocking citizens from 6 majority Muslim countries from entering the United States. A group of at least 5 states are banding together and heading to court to try to block key elements of the latest executive order. Hawaii also filing its own lawsuit. Washington State's Attorney General, while acknowledging the new order has been narrowed, says it's still unconstitutional. He's now calling on federal judge James Robart, who blocked the initial travel ban, to extend that injunction and suspend this version too.
There are still constitutional problems with core provisions of this revised executive order. We're asserting that the president cannot unilaterally declare himself free of the court's restraining order injunction. The court decides that, and we'll be asking Judge Robart to confirm that implementation of this travel ban remains blocked by my lawsuit and the federal courts.
But the White House insisting this new order will hold up in court. Here's Sean Spicer.
I think we feel very comfortable that the executive order that was crafted is consistent, and we're going to go forward on this. But I think, by all means, I don't want to. We feel very confident with how that was crafted and the input that was given.
All right, so he feels very confident. Trump feels very confident. The White House in general. But what does that mean?
Well, just let me, my legal take first. I disagree with the Washington State Attorney General. I believe that, as crafted, this executive order is constitutional on its face. Just the order itself is constitutional. That's an important distinction, and I want to get back to it in a second. I also think that the Washington State Attorney General's contention that the injunction that stopped the old order should apply to the new order is also legally flawed. It's a different order. As I said, an executive order is just the paper you read. You throw it out, you got a new one, this is my new order. So I think it's got to be a new lawsuit. I think where it fails, where the president's new executive order fails, is the same reason as the old one failed. Basically, it's not what he's saying on the paper, it's what he said during the campaign. What did he say? I'm going to ban all immigration from Muslim countries. That's what he said.
What does this have to do?
Should that matter?
I think
that was during the campaign.
The court will look at it and say, what he's trying to do is ban Muslim immigration, and he's doing it with this slick way.
But Ebony was on the show earlier this week, and she's a lawyer, and she was saying that intent matters, and that the rhetoric from the campaign trail actually could be like the ghosts that come back to haunt this new travel order. I was against that rhetoric to begin with, because I think it's a very dicey road to go forth on. I think that making clear to the American public that there's a differentiation between a travel ban and a Muslim ban continues to be their messaging problem.
So how messy does this get, Abby?
Well, that is the question, because what can he do then to fix this, right? Does he come out and say, whatever I said on the campaign trail, as we were talking about earlier, I didn't mean it that way. This is what I was trying to say, and here's exactly what is in this executive order. Because if you're saying that if they can hold that against him, what he said on the campaign trail, then this is never going to go through, right? This is never going to work.
I
and if it's held up in these courts, how long is that going to take?
The worst thing is that to get around the religious part, they took the Christian exemption out of the travel ban. In other words, I'm a very experienced Mid-East war correspondent. I've covered that region a lot. The Christians are being wiped out in the Mideast. Where Christianity was born, Christianity is being eliminated now. You go through towns like Bethlehem, used to be all Christians. Now it's a tiny little Christian neighborhood there. Why? Because of the constant attacks from ISIS and Al-Qaeda and everybody else. When you take, Christians should get some kind of priority, I think. I know it's very politically incorrect to say that, because they, like the Yazidis, a Muslim branch that's a minority, they are being oppressed. They are the most vulnerable population. If you're a Sunni living in Sunni land,
because if you take it out so that it doesn't have a religious tinge to it, now you're saying you want to put it back in?
I'm saying that should have been what he issued. That should have been the order. Instead of saying I'm going to take Muslims, I'm going to keep Muslims out, he should have said, not even mention, he should have said, I'm taking persecuted religious minorities are getting priority in terms of
let's look out into the future. You've got several states that are challenging this new ban. Do you expect more to follow suit?
Well, I mean, look, if you look at the gap between when there was a stay put on the first executive order until they put a new one in, you had attorneys flocking to airports. We had our reporters on Fox Report one night saying that people were rushing to get into this country, paying thousands of dollars coming from the 7 countries who were previously on the first executive order, trying to come in the gap in between. And those attorneys were sitting there just waiting for them. So are there going to be more cases? You're an attorney. I would imagine you're not going out of business on this. You're going to look for cases. If I was a Trump
administration, I would move on. The court's going to stop this.
But this was a tenet of what he promised on the campaign
But why isn't Pakistan and Saudi Arabia on the
really,
list
Saudi
as well?
Arabia, 19 of the 20 hijackers.
Sandra, he's learning very quickly how hard it is to get anything done in Washington. Whether it's this or healthcare or you name it.
And he has said that, by the way.
Amen, Abby.
Even with bicameral leadership on your side, both in your camp. Okay. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is reportedly dispatching 50 judges across the nation to deal with a massive backlog of immigration cases, which need to be heard. That's according to Reuters, based on sources and a letter it obtained that the department sent to judges. It says the DOJ data show a backlog of more than 1.5 million immigration cases. This coming just days after the Homeland Security Department announced illegal southwest border crossings are down 40% from January to February. We won't know for months if the decrease is an indication of a lasting effect of President Trump's policies and rhetoric, but opponents say his actions are going to hurt the most vulnerable. A former Obama administration immigration director told CNN, quote, well, the bullies can gloat and preen that they chase the skinny kids off the block. Poor people, in many cases, mothers with children or children alone fleeing intolerable violence and poverty, have been scared away. Many of those people with legitimate asylum claims, end quote. Wow, that's some tough language, Megan.
I just want to start this off with, I understand you've changed your perspective on the wall.
I have.
Why?
Because elections have consequences. A majority of people in the majority of the states made this their seminal issue. If you want to spend $25 billion on an infrastructure project that doesn't really benefit anybody, I'm stepping out of the way and saying, God bless you, do whatever turns you on. If that's what the president wants to do, instead of building bridges, tunnels, highways, hospitals, public schools, then that's a choice that that he has made. I think it's not going to work. It'll keep out Juan and Maria, the avocado picker. It won't keep out El Chapo.
Well, this is
certainly... But I think that the bigger issue, I think, is this whole border crossing. Excuse me, Senator. The fact is that people are being deterred by Trump's tough language from trying.
Do you think that's the reason?
I do, and I think that's not a bad thing.
But it doesn't matter if it is the reason or not. Perception is reality. And
I agree.
Him running on this hard stance of immigration, this 40% number is a huge number.
It is a big number,
especially historically in the month of February.
But the left is already saying why that's a bad thing, right?
Economically. But you know what? We're talking about, in a lot of these cases, criminals, right? And so when you're thinking about these courts and sending these 50 judges, the average wait time to go in front of an immigration judge, which is what many of these criminals have to do to figure out their fate, the average wait time is 2 years. We're talking about 550,000 cases, right? I mean, that is incredibly complicated. So I think what they're trying to do is, hey, we got to start speeding this up. We've got to start making some moves here.
What President Trump said he wanted to do in this first executive order was to fast-track deportations and detain illegal immigrants until their cases can be heard effectively, ending the catch and release. And he's done that, I understand it, in the second one, too, that doesn't roll in, by the way, until March 16th. So we're still talking about a document that hasn't taken effect yet. So you'll see the judges go to places like Adelanto, California, San Diego, and Chicago at first. Reuters is reporting, and then perhaps elsewhere. So those must be where some of those 550,000 cases are sitting in multitude for those judges to go to. And if they don't get enough volunteers, they're going to start assigning judges.
But as far as this president showing that he is serious and getting more serious about illegal immigration, going back to that 40% number, looking at those illegal border crossings on a dramatic decline, isn't he satisfying his base?
I think he is, but let me just say one caveat. I heard General Kelly propose, the DHS secretary propose, that children coming with their parents or with adults to the border will be given some kind of refugee status or asylum pending a hearing,
carve-out.
but they'd be separated from whoever the adult is who brought them. I think that that's a hideous idea. I mean, if they're going to take children away from their parents, I mean, I could weep now thinking about it. I know, but you know, it's there's a very contentious issue, but you cannot break up families.
The optics of that would be very detrimental.
Can you imagine?
And that is the thing, especially when the wall is going to, I assume it's going to be built very soon, or at least breaking ground very soon. Never underestimate what one picture can do, what one protest can do.
A little boy in Aleppo.
Yes.
But that goes back to how important communication is in all of these things, right? Because when he talks about this, there's got to be compassion. He's even opened up.
Who should his messenger be on this? Should it just be him?
I think he's the most important person in all of this. And he has said that when it comes to the children, he said his heart breaks. He said, this is a really emotional one for me, and it's difficult. But again, I think he is prioritizing these criminals. And the problem is people aren't digesting it as that. People are still living in fear. They don't know what their fate is going to be. So all the more, Harris, he should be the one out there on these front lines describing to people exactly what their goal is.
I just go back to the campaign, and we saw the then candidate Donald Trump do something that Hillary Clinton didn't do, Barack Obama didn't do, and that was go to the border. And yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, his perspective, perhaps he is the best person to sell it. We'll move on. President Trump getting his first report card on the economy. And it shows a healthy 235,000 jobs were added in February, the president's first full month in office. So how will that continue? What will it look like? And will Mr. Trump make good on his promise that he's made over and over again? Watch.
It's going to be unbelievable. I will be the greatest jobs president that God ever created, believe me. Our tax, trade, energy, and regulatory reforms will help us reach 4% growth and create at least 25 million new jobs within a decade. America will become the great jobs magnet of the world.
That was then candidate Donald Trump last October promising massive job creation. Now, good news for the White House. The Labor Department announcing that the U.S. economy added 235,000 jobs above expectations, and the unemployment rate ticked down to 4.7% in February. President Trump's first full month in office. Okay, so when you look at that, it sounds great, but we have been seeing steady jobs growth, and this was happening under Obama, and it's been happening since the recovery. But it does look like the Trump administration is going to take ownership of this.
I don't think President Obama was given nearly enough credit for 20 consecutive months of job growth, or whatever it was, 30. It was month after month without fail. And President Trump has now infused even more optimism into the system. I'm up about 10% since November 8th. And I'm a modest S&P investor. Rising tide lifts all boats. Everyone feels better. They're
exactly.
spending money.
So you can't take
They're
away
hiring the house painter and the lawnmower guy and adding a new bathroom.
And it's a fair point.
It does sound fancy. You got to get to Geraldo's mansion.
Geraldo's very fancy. But does not take away from the fact that there is a lot of optimism out there. And you hear it from CEOs. You hear it from small businesses. You hear it and see it when you look at the U.S. stock market, as Geraldo just referenced, at record highs.
As long as this keeps happening, as long as we talked about in the last block, immigration rates stop at the border, as long as he keeps up on these promises, whether or not he fully deserves the credit, it doesn't matter, because he's president now, and the sins of the last administration are no longer his, and everything going forward is now the responsibility of President Trump. If he continues to do this, Democrats are completely neutered in the midterm elections. If they have no messaging except cultural issues, and they're not focusing on the economy, and they're not focusing on immigration, it will be a very easy home run for Republicans.
And if he promised 4% economic growth under his administration each year of the next 4 years, Abby, this was a bold promise on the campaign trail, and it would be twice the growth that we had seen under Obama. Surely that would be a good thing.
Yeah, a lot has to happen, but you also have to focus on where these jobs are, right? And this is what's going to be really beneficial for President Trump, like coal miners, right? Infrastructure, manufacturing. I mean, those are the jobs that we're seeing some real improvements in, and where the American people, that's the heart of this country, right? That's where, well, I spent a good amount of time in Scranton, Pennsylvania, for example. That used to be that used to be the coal country, the center of this country. Now, most of the jobs are fast food, and I spent time talking to a lot of the voters there, and it was really sad to see just what it has turned into. And they said, you know, we have been promised over and over and over again that jobs are going to come back to us. And that's why a lot of the Democrats there said they switched their vote this time for President Trump.
Can I amend my commentary, though? I just want to make one amendment to my commentary. If they screw up Obamacare, nothing else matters.
Copy.
So the jobs that you're mentioning, 58,000 of them were in construction. And I think the point that you're making, Abby, is such a strong one, because these were areas specifically that Hillary Clinton didn't go to. For the end of the campaign, she missed out. And these are the very blue-collar workers who were saying, we don't just want jobs to come back, we want those jobs to come back.
And I mentioned Scranton, Harris, because that is where Hillary Clinton's dad is buried. That is where Joe Biden is from. And so if any...
It was passed on the train. He always talks about it.
And Scranton ended up going to Hillary Clinton in the end, but by a very, very small margin compared to any recent
But these
race.
places where these jobs are, the most created in construction in more than a decade, that's huge.
So when you say rising tide lifts all boats, Geraldo, something else that caught my eye, cover of the Wall Street Journal today, household net worth in the U.S. climbed to a record $93 trillion in the fourth quarter. That stock market surge leads to household net worth going up. People buy houses,
Even
they buy
salaries.
boats.
Salaries are finally ticking up. I think that...
Yeah, that's a good point.
Remember James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. Now, I totally get what Megan's saying about the emotional issues, like immigration, which I think is mainly an emotional issue rather than a substantive issue. People really react disproportionately. Obamacare, I think that they'll hash that out. But if everybody feels more optimistic about the ability to pay for their kids' college, or you know, to take a vacation, get a new car.
Can we just come to your house?
All right. You can hang out at my house. You're my neighbor, you hang out at my house, you're always welcome.
For the record, I mean, for the first jobs report under this president, it was a positive one.
Just remember how bad it was when Barack Obama
People have a lot
started.
more faith in him than we knew what we would have gotten with Hillary Clinton. So there's faith that he's going
You're
to
right, Geraldo. According to our recent poll, among Latinos, the top issue for them is not even immigration. It's the economy. That's still...
That's everybody's issue, because if you don't have money...
Not mine, national security.
To eat and to do the things you need.
All right. Well, so much for the code among former presidents, and not to speak ill of their successors. What former President Bill Clinton said in a speech, his first public appearance since Hillary's electoral defeat, that many see as a jab at President Trump. Whether this crosses the line, we shall debate.
Look who's back in his first public appearance since his wife's loss in the election. Former President Bill Clinton makes a speech that some folks heard as a shot at President Trump, even if not by name. Mr. Trump has repeatedly promised an America First policy at home and abroad, and the former president warns of the disastrous consequences from the rise of nationalism sweeping the globe. So the first thing you've got to give President Clinton is he's going after the movement that created Donald Trump, that got him elected to the presidency. But the one thing I would give Bill Clinton is he warned Hillary's campaign during the election that they needed to spend more time in swing states like North Carolina and Wisconsin, and they continued to ignore him. So I would debate he knows more that he's talking about than she does.
You know, I have a hard time when I hear President Clinton speak, not thinking how frail he looks. You know, it almost like deafens me to the substance of his remarks. I look at him, he's 3 years younger than I am, and I say, why is that? And I feel very bad, and I think that had a very negative impact on Hillary's race, the fact that they seem so frail when Donald Trump seems so ebullient and so physical and so passionate. In terms of the substance of his remarks, it was an event honoring Yitzhak Rabin, who is my favorite politician, with all due respect to Governor Huntsman. I really, and Senator McCain, I loved Rabin, and Rabin famously said, you know, the Jewish nation state, that Israel could be either Jewish or democratic. He was for, obviously, with the Oslo Accords, two-state solution. And I really do lament the spread of nationalism to the extent that it has taken hold. I think there's going to be a rebound, though. I don't think it's...
Geraldo, going back to the point, though, this is a former president. When the new president's barely in office...
Did you really hear something against President Trump there? I didn't hear
underneath it all. He didn't actually call him by name.
Yeah, I mean,
but
he would have, I think.
The Clintons have got to wake up in the morning still and think, what on earth happened? I mean,
love it.
This was their race to lose, right? I mean, they had everything they needed to win this election. They had the money, they had the ground foundation, they had the polls all in their favor. I think they're still numb to the fact that they lost. I always go back to... There's a certain level of respect and statesmanship that a president should have when they leave office. They had their 8 years to do what they wanted to do. Pass the torch on to the next person.
But you didn't see this as a dig. Are we going to live in an us and them world, or a world that we live in together? You don't think that was directed at President Trump?
I don't.
They're all doing it. It's
you,
collective as a family.
I agree with
it's
you.
It's Hillary, it's Chelsea with her sudden voice she's found on Twitter.
Well, they're not
all of it, but it's all. But it's the collective Clinton unit when they all speak for each other and do everything together. I believe that they focus group everything and then put it out in the world. And they are attacking President Trump over and over again. I think we can all collectively agree the timing is very wrong on it. If you're going to come out and criticize, be very thoughtful in the way that you do it and wait a lot longer. As Abby just pointed out, they lost a historic election that will be studied well after all of us are long dead and gone. You are historically known as the biggest loser who blew the biggest opportunity to a nationalist movement, which, by the way, isn't just happening in America. It's happening globally.
But it's a response to progressive,
but it's a response to the progressive left, and across the globe, all the people that you have seen now slowly leaving office.
I think fairly he could be looking in the mirror and having several Democrats stand behind him too. If he's talking about civility, remember it was his wife who called the Republicans her great enemy. I mean, the lack of civility is not owned by one party or the other. It is nasty and it is shared.
I think it all goes back to President Obama's failure to stop the Syrian civil war.
Oh my goodness.
If we had stopped the Syrian civil war, if he had been aggressive there and not allowed Gaddafi and Libya to be deposed and destabilize the whole region, setting loose this huge tidal wave of refugees and immigrants, that's what destabilized Europe. That's what he's talking about, because Europe now is responding in a way that says, oh,
so you're talking about the red line.
I think, I don't know if it's the red line. I think that
Yeah, but
the red line was already too late.
I just don't know if they have a lot of, if Bill Clinton, former President Clinton, has a lot of credibility to fall back on when talking about people coming together, because the big takeaway from the election, and Harris brought this up earlier, was the huge disconnect that the Clintons had with the American people. So I just don't know how much credibility he has to fall back on that statement.
All right.